So I would like to start by addressing the great respect I have for the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission and the thousands of individuals who work there. These are folks who are completely dedicated to making both Montgomery and Prince George's counties be an amazing and vibrant place to call home. Speaking specifically on the Montgomery County side, as many of you know, I was appointed to the Park and Planning Commission in 2014 and reappointed in 2018, and then after that I became the Planning Board's vice chair. I resigned in 2021 to run for office, and here I am. I can tell you, based on my experience there, our Park and Planning Commission is a unique bi-county institution to be proud of. It's an award-winning agency for their outstanding work products, receiving prestigious regional and national awards for the work planning board members like myself did alongside planning professionals. Think of the Bethesda Downtown Master Plan, the Bear Smith Corridor Master Plan, receiving national recognitions, and our Parks Department receiving numerous awards for their placemaking initiatives that are actually pretty innovative. I must tell you, these two pieces of legislation targeting the commission pains me deeply. We should be working and supporting our park and planning staff, individuals who, after the unfortunate series of events led by former individual planning board members, they never gave up. They kept working non-stop, making sure site plans and work programs were on track as they waited for the temporary planning board to be installed. We should be supporting them, not attacking them with pieces of legislation that do nothing but creating more stress among staff members. We in Montgomery County deserve way better than this. From the top, this is not a blue ribbon task force that will analyze alternative structures and compare them to the current structure and make recommendations. This legislation instead requires an alternative structure where parking planning is housed in the executive branch, where the county executive has a carte blanche over planning along desired outcome from Mr. Eldridge, and chiefs the task force reach the desired outcome. That's bad process and bad policy. Further, the proposed membership of the task force, 9 members selected by the county executive to only 3 selected by the council, only further biases the outcome. On the idea itself, the park and planning should be an executive branch agency who will get planning that is less transparent, less diverse in its views, and further away from the communities that it will impact. This is because the legislative branch, with 11 council members from across the county, including 7 districts and 4 at large, will be, by definition, be closer to the people, have a wider range of views on planning, and to appoint a more well-rounded and diverse board. Based on my experience, I can tell you, and with no shame, in 2014, when I came up to the now county executive Mark Eldridge, he was a county council member back then, and I told him that I wanted to apply for the Park and Planning Commission. He told me straight in my face, no, you don't have the qualifications. I had to get coalitions to target him, to support me. If it had been up to him, no Latinos would have been on the Park and Planning Commission yet. I'm the only one so far, the first millennial there. If we wait for just one person to be appointing the planning board, I think that's absolutely wrong, and actually it will take us backwards. And it's not like we have not been down this road before, as it was explained. The idea of giving the county executive control over the planning was tried in 1986, as she pointed out, and it was reversed only 5 years later. It's also telling that this legislation and all of 523 don't have any co-sponsors. Let me just highlight that. Bottom line, while the most recent planning board had its problems, that was unique to the individual members, not the structure itself. Furthermore, let me remind you that the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission and the current structure has served the county very well, and I am confident that the current acting board and the regular members that will be appointed this spring by this council will be outstanding, and I'll be watching closely to make sure that each one of them do their job. And with that, I'm asking my colleagues to oppose this piece of legislation, and I gotta say, you know, this is like the first week that we have as a council member, and having this now after all the trauma that just happened is just really heartbreaking. We're better than this.
I cannot speak as eloquently as Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez on this issue, but I do want to speak with the same conviction. I want to say, I want to touch specifically on the issue of MNCCPP staff. This is just the wrong time to throw chaos into the mix. They have already been through something very traumatic for them, and they're doing their jobs every day. This is not the time to do that.
This has been an unprecedented year, where the council asked for the resignations of 5 planning board members and personnel decisions that are still being worked on, which is why we haven't been able to comment further. But people are asking about this 95-year-old, 96-year-old agency. And I consider myself a reformer. And I think if any time you have a government body that's 96 years old, you should talk about its utility. And as has been evident in the previous votes, I haven't supported giving those powers to the state. But we here should figure out how we allow those powers to operate. And I have concerns about the legislation, and so let me ask its sponsor, Senator Kramer, quite frankly, I have concerns about the makeup of the task force. And it seems from my simple observation that it is not evenly balanced and that it skews towards the county executive. So can you share with us why you crafted a task force with such a makeup?
Thank you, Council President. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to address the misrepresentations and the hyperbole that surrounds what really should be a common sense initiative that I believe this county council should overwhelmingly support. So my goal here, to begin with, is to separate the fact from the fiction. And folks, let me share with you. What I do because I believe it's in the best interest of the residents of Montgomery County. This bill that we're discussing has the sponsor name Senator Kramer on it. It doesn't say County Executive Mark Elrich. It says Senator Ben Kramer. I think I bring some credibility to this subject as the individual who has sponsored legislation to put an inspector general in our Park and Planning Commission, to put an inspector general in our WSSC. Why would I have done that? It's called good governance. It's called transparency. It's called representing the best interests of the people of Montgomery County. I appreciate the fact that Park and Planning Commission may have some beautiful ribbons and trophies and awards on their walls. Does that mean we are representing the best interests of our residents here in Montgomery County? Folks, when the Park and Planning Commission was founded in the 1920s, the population of Prince George's County and Montgomery County combined barely exceeded that of Allegheny County. Montgomery County had a population of 35,000 people 100 years ago when this commission was created. We have 1.2 million residents in Montgomery County right now. Is it that unreasonable to reflect on what other options and alternatives might be? But I have heard so much hyperbole about, oh my Lord, this is a power grab, it's this, it's that. And I will share with you, the beginning of that was a report from council staff 2 weeks ago, before not all the members of the council were seated that are here today, but the prior county council. And I will read to you a very brief piece of that because this is where it began. Council report. This would change a very important dynamic in our county, which is we don't have an elected official that oversees land use and planning. We have a county council of many elected people who oversee land use and planning, with the authority to approve our master plans, change our master plans, and the zoning authority that goes along with our master plans. To take out our bi-county commission and place it under a county executive, this is a quote, one elected official is a very big change. That's where it began. I'm going to ask you all to read this very simple piece of legislation and share with me, and feel free, any one of you, stop me at the point in time where you see anything that states land use and planning will be taken from the purview of this body and placed under the county executive's purview. Stop me when you see it, because I've heard it, but I can't find where it is in the bill. Here's what the bill says. There's a task force. The task force shall study the feasibility. And I'm going to pause there. I went to Merriam-Webster to look at the definition of feasibility because evidently it was lost on staff. The definition of feasibility is capable of being done or carried out. So what's this task force doing? It's looking at the capability of being done or carried out of transferring the duties of the Montgomery County Planning Board, the Planning Department, and the Parks Department of the MNC PPC to the Montgomery County government. Are you all Montgomery County government? I believe you are. I don't see where it says it's going to go to the county executive, but that's what I've heard. You all are Montgomery County government. It continues to read, it will make recommendations, quote unquote, recommendations. How does Merriam-Webster define recommendations? To suggest an act or course of action. To suggest. So it says, make recommendations on restructuring the Park and Planning Commission to no longer include Montgomery County. That's what the task force does. You've heard it in its entirety. This task force can change nothing, nothing in law. I've heard, oh, the sky is falling. The executive is going to seize this power from us. My name's on this bill, not the county executive. I commend the county executive for having the foresight to say that he supports this as being good governance legislation, but let's move on. We're going to take a look at the composition of the task force.
Senator Kramer,
No, Mr. President, you invited me here to discuss the merits, and I have been listening for 2 weeks of the misrepresentations about this bill, its impact on this body, and its effects on county government going forward.
So my question,
yes, sir,
was, and I'll repeat it, about the composition, the
yes.
concerns I have.
Can you speak to the
composition?
So when Ben Kramer was preparing this legislation to take a look at, is it maybe time after 100 years to do for what Montgomery County, every other jurisdiction in the state of Maryland does? It has its land use and planning as close to the people of the jurisdiction as we can make it happen. Every other jurisdiction in the state. So I'm looking at this and thinking, how do we maybe look at to make it happen? We've got to have the right people. It never dawned on me that this was going to become somebody claiming council versus executive branches. That's why I never looked at the task force as, oh, we have got to have absolute parity between a council appointment and executive appointment. I was looking at what are the logical appointments. So let's take a look at who the members of the task force are. One member of the Senate, one member of the House of Delegates. Folks, like it or not, Park and Planning Commission's a creature of state government. Period, end of story. The chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. Seemed to me that made good sense. Why wouldn't I want the chair there to be part of the conversation? The county executive. Yeah, that would seem logical. The president of the county council. I think that seemed like a good idea. The director of Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services. Well, why would we possibly want that? Well, if we're going to bring land use and permitting and planning under county government, who's got the most knowledge on the subject? The department head. If the county council says, Ben, we've got experts on this as well, I will welcome the opportunity to amend this bill and to add anyone that would be bringing benefit to the task force.
Senator,
Mr. President,
there are a number of my colleagues who want to speak. I'm sure some of them will ask you for clarifying questions.
Mr. President, I didn't come here today to be shut down. I am here to try to clarify.
You have not been shut down, sir. You've been speaking for nearly 15 minutes. That is not being shut down. I looked it up in Merriam-Webster.
Mr. President, I am here because there was so much misrepresentation about this bill that, yes, I want clarification.
Sir.
And I have not finished because if
I asked you, Senator
Mr. President,
Kramer,
please let me finish and I will wrap it up. But this is important.
Please do so.
Folks, take a look at the timeline on this legislation. The report's not due until December of 2024. It would require actual legislation to implement any possible changes. It will be 2025 or 26. It would have to be 26 at the earliest before any change would come. What does that mean? End of your term, end of the county executive's term. This nonsense, this is a power grab by the exec, which won't even occur until after the county exec is no longer, unless reelected, the county exec. I think we need to put an exclamation mark on that, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I'll at least put a period there, so thank you. I will just end on this note because we do have a lot of people who want to chime in. This is a 96-year-old agency. If we are true to making sure that government is working, I think we should always strive for reform. There are no other policies that are on the table. And so I'm striving to figure out how we do that. How do we have that conversation about being better and having a more efficient operation here? This is not necessarily the right vehicle for that change. But lacking any other, I'm simply asking that we have these conversations, and whether it is something that we take up here at the council or that we work to refine this legislation so that, in my opinion, it is more evenly balanced between the branches and the jurisdictions, I would be open to that. But right now I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Next up is Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thought we were here to determine whether or not this body was going to support, oppose, hold bills, and it seems like an interesting conversation that we're having in order to do so. My views on this legislation are well documented. I shared them previously. I'm very concerned about what the makeup of the body is, what the intention is here. I think it is telling that the county council was not consulted in discussing this bill. I think it's an important point to note. I understand and appreciate the impassioned comments being
with all due respect, this is the conversation.
My time has not been yielded to you, Senator. I appreciate the passion. I have a lot of respect for you and for your service, for your family's service. I think that this is a very unfortunate conversation that we're having in the way that we're having it. And I think that the way that this bill was put forward is part of the reason for that. I agree with colleagues that there is opportunity for conversations about land use, about governance, about process. I will say two things. One, I can't say anything today that would be more on point than what the person here who has the most experience with this conversation, including me, including you, Senator, with all due respect, our colleague, Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez. And I want to associate myself with her comments because I think that they're critically important to this conversation. And the idea that she wasn't consulted, no other members of this body were consulted, no current or former planning board members, as far as I can tell, have been consulted, is very unfortunate when you're talking about the level of disruption in this conversation that was had. And I want to go back to the aspect of the staff and just reiterate the comments that have been made by multiple colleagues about how important it is for this county council, and I would hope for our state delegation, to offer the level of support for the professionals in that agency who have done incredible work, who take a lot of unfortunate negative commentary and feedback from the public from doing the work that they do. And the fact that we would diminish their work, we would downplay their work, we would introduce disruption to them being able to continue their work, I think is very deeply unfortunate. And the last thing that I will say on this is seizing the unfortunate situation that has recently occurred is very unfortunate. I think is very unhelpful. And I also think we have to reiterate that the system that we have set up, this 96-year-old system, as has been noted, worked. And I just want to end my comments on that. The conversation in many ways as part of this so-called hyperbolic discussion has created the idea that somehow, based on what transpired over the last several months by individual planning board members, creates the reason for everything being blown up, when in fact the council's oversight over the planning board, promptly addressing those issues, restoring confidence in the public, creating stability among the hardworking staff, I don't think we can lose sight of that. And I think it is disrespectful, and I think it is deeply unfortunate to suggest to the directors who are here and the staffs that they lead that somehow there is a problem among the staff. There is not a problem among the staff.
Did you hear me say any comments about being problems amongst the staff?
I also didn't hear me yielding my time to you, sir.
Senator.
No, I've heard that repeatedly,
Senator.
and I'm not going to be bullied into not responding to someone who's saying that, making the accusation that somehow I attacked staff. Staff was not mentioned in the conversation, council member.
With all due respect, I think if anybody is watching this conversation and they heard the word bully, I don't think that they'd be referring to anybody who is sitting on this dais. I just want to conclude with the point that the system that we have set up worked, that the staff has continued to do their important function, and that the work of the Parks Department and the planning staff has continued and has been of extremely high quality. And I want to end with that because that's where we should start, and that should be the primary focus, is doing the people's work and in supporting the staff who on a day-to-day basis are doing that work. And I just want to appreciate my colleague, the former vice chair of the planning board staff that this legislation seeks to eliminate, and all of my colleagues for the work that we have tried to do in order to support that staff. And with that, I'll yield back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to announce the council members in order who still want to speak. Council members Jawando, Mink, Balcom, and then Sales. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have wide, varying ideological views on this council. I think it's a good thing. We're going to get into a lot of discussions over the next 4 years, and it'll be fun. I've gone to testify in Annapolis many times, seeking support and giving support of bills. Never been before your subcommittee, but I would hope when I come that I wouldn't act the way you have acted today. And I like you a lot, Senator Kramer. But there are things said about all of us. As you know, you've been in politics a long time, your family has served in for a long time, that are not true or mischaracterizations in public and other places, and then we have to come respond to them. I don't think the way you comported yourself today was the appropriate way to do so. And I actually am sympathetic to the bill. I think that, to Council President's point, there are no sacred cows here. We should reevaluate 100-year-old institutions, and I think it would be more appropriate for us to look into it and work with the state. It is a state-created entity, you rightly pointed out. I had similar substantive questions to the Council President about the balance of the membership. I am still open, despite how I started, to working with you and others to figure out if there's a way to balance it more appropriately and see if there's a way to support it. I'm not against looking into it. I also want to reiterate support for the staff and the interim planning chair and the folks that are working at Park and Planning in the commission. But we can look at it. I think there are a lot of things we do in this county that we could improve upon. We started this council session talking about transparency and accountability. That was the first statement I made of this council session, how we can have better processes that deliver more equitable outcomes. But I would hope we can do so in a way that's respectful and that is a mutual kind of working relationship. And I understand that's been strained. So I'll say to you, I'm still open to that. And I just hope we can reset the conversation here today, because actually when I go to Annapolis, they limit my time to 2-3 minutes. We didn't do that. Let's get it back in line, and let's see if there's ways that either we take the authority and do it. I don't disagree with your goal, but let's do it in a collaborative way.
Senator, thank you for coming this afternoon and sharing with us your passion for this bill and your passion for making reform. And clearly you've heard from almost all of us that there is a shared sentiment whether or not this bill is the right way to achieve that. We will take a vote momentarily to determine that, but I'm getting the sense that we want more conversations. And so I personally invite you to engage with us possibly before next legislative session, so that maybe we can all collaboratively produce a bill that meets the goals of reforming a 100-year-old institution without tipping the scales for the outcome of that task force.
And I think the very next bill will also address that issue.
Yes, I expect that. So let's get through this first one. I'm hearing most people want to oppose, so all those in favor of opposing this bill, raise your hand. Okay, that is 10 of us.